In modern times, there are some governments, namely North Korea, that not only prevent the spread of gospel, but they prevent the spread of all information outside of their country. And so all those people born and raised in that country are taught to worship their leader, and they're prevented from ever meeting Jesus or having a relationship with him. So what does God say to those people when they pass away? Does he want to form a relationship with them, and how can they get to heaven?
Do you think there's like a possibility that what's written in the Bible is not true? The idea that like God created everything, that on the first 7 days and such. How do you verify something? Because the Bible is written by humans.
I sure hope it was.
Then how do you know those humans were telling the truth?
Is believing in Jesus just blind faith or something deeper? Watch as Stuart and Cliffe Knechtle face tough college questions and unpack what a real relationship with God through Jesus truly looks like. You'll want to hear every word.
Quick question. Do you think there's like a possibility that what's written in the Bible is not true? Like
anything's possible. He's a dream. Possible. Anything's possible.
Then outside of the Bible, what is the evidence for us to believe that it's true? Like everything in it is true. Not anything in the Bible. Outside the Bible, what is there for us to believe that it is true?
First point, I don't assume that every page of any book is all true. Rather, I put together some tests to determine historical credibility, accuracy of manuscript transmission, accuracy of translation.
So, like, the idea that, like, God created everything, that on the first 7 days and such. How do you verify something? Because
it's impossible to verify that.
The Bible told you, correct?
No.
Then why do you believe it?
In Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, the word day, which in Hebrew is yom, refers to a 12-hour period.
I'm not talking about the nuances, but the idea that God created everything, that God created this world, that God exists at all.
Yeah.
You get that from the Bible.
No, sir, I do not. I do not believe that God exists because a book tells me so.
Yeah.
I believe God exists because I observe order and design. And I know that order and design does not come about by chance, because I would have flunked out of Yale.
Okay, then
all right?
How do you...
I was not smart enough to go through here, okay? Why? Because I was not able to bring order and design out of the chaos of what was up here.
But how do you know that?
You think there's a God or not?
I think there's some sort of higher power.
Okay. The evidence is that the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are historically reliable.
Aren't those in the Bible?
Yeah?
Okay, I'm talking like outside of the Bible.
Okay, what do you want to know?
Especially on the higher aspects of the Bible, the idea of a higher power and attributing that to the God of the Bible. How do you know that's true? Why do you believe
I was answering your question directly.
Okay.
All right, so you got to slow down.
Okay.
Okay? The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John give us an accurate historical picture of Jesus.
Yeah.
Based on that historical evidence of the trustworthiness of Jesus Christ, I take a step of faith and begin a relationship with Christ. When I experience his trustworthiness in my life personally, I view his statements about the credibility of the Old Testament and his own words as being reliable. So if you die and rise from the dead, I'll listen very carefully to everything you have to say. Does that make sense? That's why I trust Jesus. Does that make sense?
So you trust in the Old Testament because Jesus told you?
No, he didn't tell me to.
Because
Jesus never talked to me personally, okay?
But Jesus vouched for the...
Jesus, exactly. Jesus treated the Old Testament as the Word of God.
And you believe in however many years between now and back then that there was no room for error or inaccuracies in the Bible and other historical texts at all.
Well, of course there have been errors.
So there's mistakes in the Bible. There's inaccuracies in the Bible.
Yeah.
So then how do you know what's true and what's not? How could you...
Because the overwhelming evidence, if you study the issue, is those variations in the original manuscripts in Greek are so small, they don't change anything. It's a question of personal article, impersonal article, singular, plural, repetition of a phrase. Jesus was the son of Mary, who was a virgin in Matthew chapter 1. The discrepancies, the variations in the Greek New Testament are so small, they don't change nothing.
I'm not even talking about fully discrepancies, but the idea that the Bible was written by humans, right? The Bible was written by humans.
I sure hope it was.
Then how do you know those humans were telling the truth? like our entire faith system is based on trust of humans from thousands of years ago. And if they're lying, they're crazy, as you guys are saying, then everything we know crumbles. And the possibility of that exists no matter what.
Yes, that's right. What are your tests that you use to determine historical reliability of any book?
As we were talking about before, like the verification of other sources.
Okay, so there are plenty of other documents about Jesus.
Yeah.
Josephus,
Yeah, I'm not talking
Antiquities.
about the existence of Jesus.
Well, then what are you talking about?
I was talking about God as a higher power.
No, sir. Now you're not being fair with me. Now you're being dishonest. I told you flat out, there's no way that a thinking person can believe in God because a book tells you so.
Okay, that's what, and I'm sorry.
Well, then you went right back to that. Come on, sir. Are we going to talk right or not?
Yeah.
No, we're not. If you're going to come on.
I feel like we're talking.
You're running circles, and that's not fair. We agreed earlier.
Yeah.
I do not believe God exists because a book, the Bible, tells me so.
You believe it because the book told you to believe that Jesus.
No. And I'm going to have to go on to somebody else real soon if we don't start communicating better.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe God exists because the evidence of order and design in creation points to an intelligent mind.
Yeah.
I believe God exists because I experience moral absolutes, which points to a moral lawgiver.
Yeah.
I believe God exists because the evidence is life comes from life, not from non-life.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's more plausible and reasonable for me to believe, in the beginning, a living being created life, not in the beginning, non-life created life. That's why I believe God exists. Has nothing to do with any book. It has to do with an observation of life.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I believe God exists. Now, why do I believe the Gospels are historically accurate? Because I have tests that I use to determine whether any document that claims to be historical is reliable. My tests are 4: internal consistency, literary style, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence. And the Gospels pass that with flying colors, as does the Quran. If you're going to tell me Muhammad never lived, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Muhammad was a real historical person.
Yeah.
All right, now are we clear or are we unclear?
Okay. One last question. I'm trying to understand your logic genuinely. So you believe, like, because of historical verification and other sources and internal accuracy and such, that the Gospels are true.
Are historically accurate. That's all. Let's say it all together. Historically accurate. Hey! Some people can listen around here. It's good to see here.
Okay, then, so from the teachings of the Gospels, and the teaching of the Gospels spreading the word of Jesus,
Yeah?
that word of Jesus that gives you a faith in the teachings of the Old Testament. Yes or no?
No. My experience of the trustworthiness of Christ in my life.
In your life.
In my life.
So it's not the Bible, it's your life. No, now we're changing the story.
I got him. Let me in. Let me in, coach.
All right. Your turn. Oh, man.
Here we go, baby. I'm gonna get. You might get me, but I'm gonna try. All right. So, within the first 100 years after Jesus' life,
Yeah.
25 extra biblical sources we have from Josephus, the Talmud, many others, talking about the whole narrative of the Christian faith. So throw out the Bible, throw out the documents, throw out Christianity. It was all eyewitness testimony from those outside of the Bible, and then these eyewitnesses to the resurrection
Eyewitness
itself.
testimonies could be false.
They can be false. All of history can be false. I'm totally with you. Alexander the Great, everybody could just be false. So why even come and have a history department here?
Yeah.
It all could be false.
That's not the argument I'm making. I'm just saying that, like,
You just said that, though.
okay.
That is the argument you're making. See, you keep, what I hear you keep doing is you keep saying, this is the argument I'm making, but no, as soon as we give you an answer, no, that's not the argument I'm making. That's exactly what I'm hearing every single time. It's being redundant. So what's the argument? Because he just said, the reason why we listen and we think about the Old Testament and work through what is true, metaphorical, literal, what is not, is by looking at Jesus Christ.
My
Yeah.
assertion right now
Yeah.
is not even an active assertion of, yes, the Bible is false, it's all false, because I want to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the idea that me and myself personally, like, I can't reconcile the idea, like, the possibility that, like, all these testimonies, all these eyewitness testimonies, everyone believing in Jesus, that could have been a giant cult back then.
It could have been.
And that everyone was just crazy and believing in that cult.
Could have been.
And
And then all of a sudden the early church was built off of this cult that claimed to be overnight believing that a God became human, died, rose from the dead. Then all of a sudden, all these Jews who never would have believed in a God who would have actually died on a cross and rose from the dead, they would have been the last ones to believe that. All of a sudden, overnight, 2/3 of the Roman Empire became Christian. What's the hoax? What's the hoax? What happened? No. See, if you're going to deny this, you need to tell me, or maybe tonight, come up with it yourself. You need to tell me then what occurred. What occurred? It wasn't the resurrection. So what occurred?
Again,
If you don't have a theory and you're coming to a crime scene, bro, if you're coming to a crime scene and I have a theory based off of the evidence I have, and you have no evidence to the contrary whatsoever, you're just saying, it didn't happen. That's weak, man. You should be fired on the spot.
I'm not making an active assertion, and I'm not, like, there's no burden of proof because I'm not asserting that anything's false or anything. What I'm simply asking is why you believe and how you believe. Because, like, again, back to the whole cult thing, we've seen, like, the idea of a cult.
The Branch Davidians. Absolutely.
Like, we've seen people,
Jim Jones. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And, again, I'm not asserting, yes, this has to be false.
Right.
I'm more asking as someone who wants to believe how I can truly believe with all faith and no doubt.
Absolutely. And so you have to go to Jesus Christ yourself by reading the Gospels, figure out, did he exist? So 98.9% of scholars believe that he existed, right? So we're there with that. Secondly, was his character pure, perfect? He claimed to be God. We expect some pretty good character, right?
Yeah.
What about his sayings? He said these things that were of authority, which meant they transcended even the law at the time that the rabbis were talking about. So his teachings must have been pretty stinking good. Now, what about the resurrection? Well, all scholars, even the most atheistic, will say that there was an empty tomb. That tomb was Joseph of Arimathea's, that the disciples claimed to have had some experience with Jesus, who at first they thought it definitely was not Jesus, but then all of a sudden they claimed to have had experiences that it was, that there was tremendous life change with the top rabbi in the known world at the time, which was Saul. The life change turned to Paul because he had an encounter with the resurrected Christ. And then the church began. And then all of a sudden, 34% of the world became Christian. Now, it could have been, Jesus Christ could have been, like you're saying beautifully, Jim Jones, or he could have been David Koresh, who had these two huge cults. So he claimed to be God. As a mental health therapist, I see a lot of people who claim to be God who are schizophrenics. Many. So Jesus Christ could have been a schizophrenic who pulled off this incredible hoax, and now 34% of the world think he's the Son of God. Could be the case. Could be crazy. Could be the case.
Yeah. So, okay.
What is more likely? That he actually was a son of God, or that he pulled off this incredible hoax that has changed the world and changed the entire known Roman Empire? And by the way, if you're here at the school searching for a higher level education, you do realize it was all Christian missionaries who started this school, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, right? So the search for truth was fully Christian.
Yeah.
So, do you sacrifice for others, do you think, at times? Yeah. Are you kind to others? Are you compassionate to others? So. Okay, you are a Christian even if you say you're not a Christian, according to Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah.
So be a little more consistent and don't be a Christian in your lifestyle if you're going to be an atheist. And don't live that way, right?
Yeah. I understand that, but I don't understand how, like, you agree that God's messengers are humans, right? And humans can make mistakes. So I don't understand how that trust in maybe that historical event leads to your trust in everything else in the Bible that's being said, and no, like, acknowledgement of the fact that maybe this teaching was wrong, maybe this scripture was wrong, maybe this was mistranslated, maybe this was misaccurate. And for someone to base their journey to heaven on an unreliable document that could have mistakes, and to believe that a perfect being had, like, this document to give us their message, and it has mistakes, it has inaccuracies, but it's supposed to eternally teach us, I can't reconcile.
Throw it out.
The Bible?
Throw it out.
Throw it out.
Throw it out.
Okay, what do
we
we do?
still have everything that happened. Throw it out.
But now how do I know how
everything that happened outside of the Bible? We have all the documents that I just mentioned, all the sources, that this is what occurred from enemy attestation. People who didn't want the Bible to be true, the events in it to be true, were claiming that this occurred.
I'm not talking about the events. I'll tell you about how do I know how to live my life now if we're throwing out the Bible. So
well, sure, the ethical teachings that were passed down orally and eventually written down, sure, you want to live off those ethical teachings. Now, you could say because of the character of the people who actually wrote them, because of the character of Christ. Well, yeah, you certainly don't know him. But wait a second, hold on. I just said you are living like a Christian based off of all your values and ethics. That came directly from the Judeo-Christian faith that founded this very university. So if you're doubting all of it, and saying, no, it's wrong, it's not true, then why not live more selfishly? Why not cheat on your exams if you can get away with it? That's from an evolutionary perspective, just get away with it.
There's many Christian values that I don't believe in, I don't live by.
Okay, what are some of those?
Premarital sex.
Premarital sex. So this is why you're not a Christian. You said 5 times out here, guys, I just want to make sure we all heard this. I want to be a Christian, but then all of a sudden we get to the very bottom of it, and it's an emotional bias. It's your faith based off the frustration on premarital sex. And I'm with you, bro. I don't want to be a Christian either, because of the emotional bias of I want to sleep with as many women as possible.
That's not what I said.
That's exactly, I promise you that is what is driving you. I promise you that's what's driving you, at least a huge part of it.
Okay, so, okay.
All right, that was your last question, right? Because we're going to have to move on.
I got a really good follow-up question.
Oh, it better be really good. If it's not good, we got to out.
Really good. Okay. We could really, I really just want to hear your thoughts.
Get the gotcha moment, yep.
Okay. So, again, throw the Bible out, but we're trusting the ethics and teachings of Christianity because of the character of these figures. But if you just said we could throw the Bible out and that it's about the historical variability and the Bible is flawed, why are we believing in every single thing the Bible is saying and every single teaching it has if you yourself just said that, like, you can't fully trust it?
There are endless amounts of things in the Old Testament that are descriptive and not prescriptive in the New Testament because they are not repeated. So we're not, I'm going to play football this afternoon, possibly with my daughter. I'm going to throw the pigskin. Well, it says in the Old Testament, don't touch pigskin.
Yeah.
So am I breaking a law?
No.
But it says it in the Bible, according to you. It says in the Bible, I am breaking a law.
I don't know. It seems like it's not. I don't know. It seems like you're leading me to saying it's not breaking law.
I'm not leading it. It says it.
Okay, so it is breaking law.
According to you?
According to the Bible, yes.
According to you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, what did I just say? That's in the Old Covenant. That's descriptive at the time for the Israelite nation.
So
now in the New Covenant, it's not prescriptive because it's not repeated, and Jesus came to fulfill that law.
So we're just interpreting the Bible.
So just remember, yes, you interpret every single thing that you read, I promise. Everybody here interprets. If you don't interpret, you are lying to yourself and to me right now. I promise you interpret about it. The sooner you are honest with yourself, I promise, the more unbiased you will come to interpreting the Bible.
Oh, that was my last question.
Great questions today, man.
Thank you.
Love it, absolutely. Good job.
I was watching one of your earlier videos on YouTube where you said that you don't have to be born Christian or raised Christian to turn towards God. You can see God and find Him in your own life.
Yes, sir.
And form a relationship with Him.
Correct.
And that hell is the absence of a relationship with God.
Yep.
Now, in modern times, there are some governments, namely North Korea,
Yeah.
that not only prevent the spread of gospel,
Right.
but they prevent the spread of all information outside of their country.
Yeah.
And so all those people born and raised in that country are taught to worship their leader, and they're prevented from ever meeting Jesus or having a relationship with Him.
Yeah.
So what does God say to those people when they pass away? Does He want to form a relationship with them, and how can they get to heaven?
How did Jesus treat people?
He treated them with respect and kindness.
So we have all the evidence in the world. You go right to Romans 1 and 2 about, you could take, philosophically, you could take what Paul's saying there is basically the teleological argument, which is all the beauty, all the art, all the immaterial things, which I was trying to challenge this guy on, from a materialistic, secular perspective, you cannot get, but all the immaterial things lead us outside ourselves to, there's a God. Paul also says moral objectivity. What is in your conscience, right and wrong? So God knows ultimately what that person's going to choose, but He doesn't determine them to choose one or the other because He's outside of space and time. So He knows what their choice will be, but they still have free will to make the decision. But you're right, if they aren't exposed to a Bible, and they're probably not going to get a Bible, well then they're not going to have the same type of exposure that we have, and they're going to be judged differently. That's why we have examples of being judged differently in the Bible, or people coming to know Christ differently.
Those not exposed to Christ are judged differently. They get a little bit maybe more leniency down the line because they haven't had the exposure, they didn't have the chance. And you're also talking about objective morality in that the sort of the claim of there's a certain set of rules you live by. You respect the people who are around you. You respect your neighbors. You're kind to people. You feed the hungry.
Yeah.
This sort of objective claim of morality. What is your perspective on, say, an atheist or an agnostic who may let's say even fully by coincidence, but end up following the rules governed by objective morality, or the moral things to do as governed by objective morality. But just plainly does not believe Jesus is the Messiah, believe in Jesus
Real
as
quick,
the
so
Son
we
of
gotta
God.
leave.
Yeah.
In a few minutes.
There is nothing out of your own performance or merit that can get you to God. So it does not matter if an atheist buys into Christian ethics and morality, Hindu ethics and morality, or humanist ethics and morality. It really doesn't matter whatsoever, because it's not about your own good works that get you to heaven. It's about understanding who Jesus is, what he did for you, and growing in a trusting relationship with him.
Let's say hypothetically there's someone who bumped into the Bible one time, sort of brushed through it and then kind of put it down, or sort of was informed by it in some ways, but then kind of put it down. There's this, do you see it as sort of a binary thing of you have people who are not exposed to Jesus and therefore get judged differently? Or is it a spectrum of people who have maybe been exposed in different to different magnitudes? And does God, as you see it,
I would check out, great question, I would check out Acts chapter 10. The wealthy businesswoman Lydia is attracted eventually and believes in Christ based off of more of an intellectual approach in reading the scriptures.
Okay.
The centurion is based off of actually more of a miracle. God brings about an earthquake. And so he needs this miracle because he's this hardened intellectual blue-collar guy who is, I'm not going to believe any evidence, but the experience of a miracle opens him up. Then the slave girl, it's an emotional connection where there's social justice involved, that actually Christians come and they pull her out and away from the slavery that she was in, and she feels that liberty and the freedom of it, and now she actually has a conversion to Christ. So just in that one chapter in all of Scripture, you have 3 different case studies of how people come to know Christ differently.
So is the lesson that given a single exposure, you have a path to God? Is that the takeaway?
Yeah, we all get different types of exposures. Descartes was exactly right about the starry skies above and the conscience within. As a Christian, he said that's how God reveals himself, especially to those who have not heard of Jesus Christ.
If that conversation opened your eyes or made you think deeper, don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe for more powerful dialogues that bring clarity, truth, and real answers.